So we are coming up on our 1-year anniversary of completing the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. John and I, along with your brother last year, completed Leadville for our first time. And we've been discussing the things that we did wrong and the things that we did right. And today we're going to share with you a top 10 list of things that we would change if we went back again. So if you're anything like us, you're probably perusing YouTube, looking for videos on race strategy, mechanical part changes, nutrition, you name it. We spent countless hours last year at this time doing that, right?
Endless hours. Yeah, and I would say we were pretty frustrated with what we found. Now, not frustrated in the sense of not finding enough things to watch, but I believe everything was either for maybe the Cat 1 racer, or maybe the exact opposite, the person trying to just finish.
Yeah.
And then there's that middle segment of people that, for us anyway, like we're not mountain bikers. We're people that are in shape that got into mountain biking.
Correct. Yeah.
And you can find out more about our story. Check out this video. It talks about how we got into mountain biking, the Whiteface 100, which was the Leadville qualifier, how I got roped into it. And next thing you know, we were just trying to learn and cram as much as we possibly could to have the best race that we could on race day.
Yeah.
And it's always easy to look back and say, oh, I would have done that differently. I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that. And we found ourselves saying, I wish I knew. I wish someone else said. And maybe they did, and we didn't hear it.
Yeah.
So that's why we have this video to just kind of like drill it down and say, all right, what are some things that for you, especially if you're looking, this is in July of 2024, and you're racing in a month. So what are some of the things that you can actually act on right now that could change your race?
Yeah. So let's kick it off with number one. So the biggest regret I think we have, but we were forced to due to family and work schedules, is that John and I flew into Denver 2 days prior. So we're coming from East Coast at sea level, flying into, Denver at over 5,000 feet. And then we spent a night there and we drove, to Leadville. And we stayed just outside of Leadville for one night before the race. And that's all the acclimation that we did. And your brother spent 2 weeks, felt like he spent 2 years when he kicked our butts, right? But he spent 2 weeks there on a family vacation prior, and he had a much better time acclimating, right?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because I got to live his acclimatizing, if you will, like from day one. And then he went on his first ride and he was like, oh my God, that was awful.
Yeah.
His watts were really low. His heart rate was really high. And he's like, holy crap, this is legit. And then you fast forward, I think even day 3 or 4, he was like, oh, I feel so much better.
Yeah.
But we had seen some studies where people actually said the 3rd and 4th day might be the worst.
Correct. There's a window, right? So we didn't want to go in that window of high risk, but we also couldn't really afford to get out there 2 weeks prior. So a lot of people did swear by going in as close to the race as possible and just winging it.
Yeah.
Now, we also did some training strategies prior, right? So we did something called EWAT training. So exercise without oxygen training. So we basically worked with a local physician, and we were on a spin bike, and we were hooked up to, a mask that was regulating the gas we were breathing. And he would take us up to altitude or mimicking that oxygen concentration. And we started out, I'm going to talk about that experience a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. We started out the first day, I think it was only 8,000 feet, right? Day one. And you're hooked up to heart rate. You've got your mask on that's exchanging gas, and he would flip a lever and he would change, again, oxygen concentration for an interval. Now, we're not going hard. We're pedaling easy. It's like zone 1 effort.
It was negative watts.
Yeah. So your interval is from lack of oxygen, not from effort. And we were also checking pulse ox, right? So we had pulse ox on our finger. And for anybody that doesn't know, that should be somewhere between 96 and 100 if you're healthy. Well, day one, I don't know about yours, but mine dropped down to the 60s.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
It was definitely, he's like, you could see that look on his face where he's like, you need to raise that up a little bit.
Yeah.
Go a little easier. Because it's not safe to be at that level. Like you could actually have like legit damage.
Yeah. You should be in the ambulance on the way to the hospital if you were in the 60s, otherwise. So we did about 5 or 6 sessions of EWAT training, and we got up to, I think, 16,000 feet, right, of equivalent oxygen deprivation. And it's hard to really say how much that helped. It's a really hard thing to quantify. I did feel better feeling that way, a little bit of tunnel vision, kind of getting shaky and loopy. I knew what to expect, which at least gave me a little bit of like security or confidence when that did happen in the race going up Columbine. But again, really hard to quantify what that did versus your brother staying out there for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Now the other thing, so just to put it in perspective, so my time was 10 hours, 58 minutes. I really had a stretch goal of 9 hours. 9.5 was kind of like my training, my FTP, like a lot of that stuff kind of spoke to that. What was your finishing time?
9:34.
9:34. Yep. My brother was like 9:07.
Yeah.
He was so close.
Yeah.
But so Ryan never trains. So I would be on an indoor trainer when I'm indoors, and I would always have a fan on me, right? So definitely lower temperature. Ryan would never have a fan on. So you always were kind of training in heat. We came in, did a ride together in the gym, and I just, to hit my watts, my heart rate spiked way up. The heat difference was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Ryan went on the EWAT, and he was able to get, like, you were able to actually get your heart rate up a lot higher without going into the 70s and the 60s.
Yeah.
And
I
couldn't get my heart rate out of like 100.
Yeah.
So I actually had a question, and I'd love to ask Dr. Vickers this, like, was that a sign in any way that, hey, you're going to do better at altitude and you're not?
Yeah.
Because this thing is showing that you're not handling it well and you're handling it better. So it's just a thing that I would note for the next time I do this.
Yeah.
Just to see,
Agreed.
Is there something learned from that?
We need to get power pedals on that spin bike.
Right. Yeah.
And then
I did
also looked at watts. We'll do that next time too, assuming we go out there. Cool. So that's number one. So it's just get out there early, acclimatize as much as you possibly can, and it makes a huge difference. And if you don't, I mean, you're giving up an hour and a half potentially, or an hour in a race that you spend 6 months or more training for.
Yeah.
So it's worth the week.
I would go earlier just to not have another excuse. You know, it's also in your head, like that feeling you get. I couldn't get watts, and my heart rate kept right. Like I couldn't, my normal, everything I expected wasn't happening in all of my metrics, right? Heart rate was too hot. Watts were too low. The feeling in my chest was awful. And I was like, well, can I go at that heart rate for 9 hours?
If you don't trust
I shouldn't.
it.
But is that a sign of just where I'm at? And I can, my body can do it. I don't know. So I pulled back, right? And that's why I'd finished that 10:58. And we were together at Columbine, which we're going to talk about. And but I would go 4 or 5 days earlier, spend the extra money, acclimatize properly, just to say, you know, hey, I surrendered 6 to 8 months of my life. I worked really hard for this, and I would want to do that one extra thing to make it that much better.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So the next one I would do, now this might just be for the people that have to come last minute, but I totally would have signed up for a food delivery service. Like I think are the 2 times we went to the grocery store, the amount of time there, running around trying to figure out what to buy, and then, you know, driving all the way back home when you're already in a condensed schedule. Like you don't have a lot when you fly in a day and a half early. Everything's kind of pretty regimented. It takes a couple hours to get up to Leadville. So that would be one thing, food delivery. Number 2 is I probably would buy pre-packaged or pre-made food. Because when we tried the night before the race, we tried to cook dinner, and we bought probably like 20 sweet potatoes. They never cooked. Like, I don't think we ever ate any of them because we couldn't get them to actually cook. So I would have gone to like Whole Foods or something, and I would have,
you're dead on.
Maybe there's a service out there that people could sign into Leadville to get like home cooked food. That would actually be, it's got to be out there.
We should start it if there isn't. That's
but
a great idea.
If we went and our spouses were there, I mean, could that have been something where we go do this to check in and do our pre-race ride and do all the other stuff, and someone else is helping with the food prep, maybe your crew or something. But even our crew kind of flew in a little bit late. And they were we're
scrambling.
So I would, food delivery service and then pre-made food, so I wouldn't have to worry about cooking.
You're trying to get your stress down as much as possible before the most stressful day of your entire life.
Right.
You know, previously and maybe forever. So HRV scores, resting heart rate.
We should put our HRV scores on there.
Disaster.
They went negative.
Like I've never seen a HRV score that low.
I haven't
either. Your sleep stinks. You're dehydrated. So you just want to check every box to be able to chill.
Yes.
And we didn't check any boxes. There was no chill.
We were running stressed the whole time.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the race. So number 3, the thing that I would have taken advantage of more if I would have known the importance is paceline strategy, right? So we discussed a little bit of strategy about staying together, but it's so hectic in the beginning at Leadville, right? When you're starting in a wave and so many people are on the same single lane road and then you duck into your first climb, it's impossible to have that strategy to stay with somebody. So we couldn't stay in a little pace line and draft off each other. And I wish I would have latched onto other people's wheels a little more and, fine taking pulls too. I'm not saying I'm here for free watts, but I didn't do that until probably towards the middle of the race. And then I used it strategically in the middle to push a little harder.
Going back from end of Columbine all the way to the next
correct
Powerline Hill. Is that what it is?
Yeah. Coming back. Yep. Used it as much as I could, but the herd was pretty thin and I had maybe one small group and then I left them with another guy and I was on his wheel and we were taking turns, but I felt like everyone's pacing strategy was a little different at that point where no one synced up well, at least where I was. Like I was always either, trying to go a little harder and not intentionally drop a guy, but drop somebody. Or I couldn't quite hold the next person. Like there wasn't an equal. So I feel like I just missed out on an opportunity to save a bunch of energy.
Yeah. So my brother, who was at 907, so and what we learned at Whiteface is that if you trust your fitness, if you have the endurance in sort of your soul and your training, that you probably could go out a little harder than you think.
Correct.
And hold on to those paceline groups.
Yeah.
I mean, that helped us tremendously at Whiteface. And I believe we would get that same benefit at Leadville.
I agree. I think that what at least scared me was everything you read says you can't pop early, right? And there is truth to it, right? So if you do go over your threshold and you're pushing like VO2 max efforts and you try to hold it as long as you can at sea level, it takes forever to calm back down and settle, and you might really screw like your next half hour. So that early climb, trying to throttle back a little bit, just having that voice in the back of my head saying, don't go now. Wait, this race is we've barely scratched the surface. So I think you're right though. Round 2, have a little more confidence getting after it. So reliable teammates. Make sure you have reliable teammates and crew members.
Yeah. So when we started talking about this tip, it was centered around Ryan and I are just about to go up Columbine.
Yeah.
So you take this hard left and that's officially where the climb starts. And all of a sudden Ryan goes, "Oh my God, I don't have my hydration pack." Ryan had one bottle and he had already drank like half of it.
And for those that don't know Leadville, half gallon bottle, right? I kind of smashed that as I was leaving the aid station. And we're going up the Columbine climb, which took almost an hour. And you're going up how many thousands?
Is it 3,000 feet? I can't remember.
3,000 feet. And you wind up at like 12,800 feet. And that's when your eyes don't work anymore. Your brain doesn't work. You're seeing tunnel vision. It's the hardest moment of the race. And we're about to start this climb that lasts forever. And I barely have any water. And this is after months of prepping a nutrition strategy, hydration packs. We're swapping out Camelbacks. We bought extras so you don't have to wait and refill. You just swap it with a crew member. Totally blew that.
Yeah.
Right.
So the reliable teammate part is make sure you have your crew with very specific. Now our crew was awesome in all honesty. So this situation Ryan had.
This was my fault.
Yeah. He had to go to the bathroom and he just jumped off his bike, took his pack off, let his crew member kind of swap the pack.
Yeah.
And then when he came charging back, the energy made you not think, right? The
Correct.
energy made you like, go, 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 go.
Correct.
And maybe another tip is to understand that maybe you don't need to rush those. Like a lot of people go in and they think they have to finish, like it's like NASCAR or something. And in a 9-hour race, like if you take an extra minute and a half to just okay, do I have everything?
Yes.
Like mental checklist.
Much more important to have everything than it is to save 8 seconds.
Right.
So number 5 was hand fatigue. So this happened to me 1, maybe 2 rides prior to Leadville. I didn't think much of it. One was when we did Whiteface, and another was when we went to Frederick and did like a 70-mile ride out there with lots of changes in big climbs and descending. But my hands would go a little numb at the end, especially right thumb from shifting. And I put it on grips, so I changed grips, but I wasn't really confident with it. And during Leadville, the back half of that race, I think it was more towards probably like mile 70, 80. I mean, I was done. It started going down Columbine with that long, long descent, and I'm sure I'm gripping tighter than I probably should. and you're going, you have two-way traffic, mountain bikes going down this descent, and I don't know what we were doing at that time, but had to be doing some segments that were 35 miles an hour flying, and you're just trying not to fall off the mountain. So you're gripping the bars a little too tight. Well, that haunted me later in the race, and one of my shift levers feels pretty tight, like the downshift lever, and I'm not sure if mine needs to be adjusted or what, but it became a big problem mile 80 plus. The last 20 miles of that race, downshifting required me to take my right hand off the handlebars and punch my shifter. Like, that was the only way I could downshift. So we're doing those last two big climbs. It's punch, back on the grips and go. I don't know how much it limited my time, but it occupied a lot of my
mental
space
energy.
and brain. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So make sure you're happy with your hand grips. They make different sizes. They make different cushion levels, which I didn't know about until after, done a lot more research on that. And then check your shifters too. Like, you can adjust that stuff. You can swap shifters out. Just check over your mechanicals, because if your longest ride's been 6-7 hours and you're going to do Leadville in 10-11, that's a significant addition in time where a lot of stuff goes wrong that you just wouldn't otherwise think about.
Yeah.
Cool.
True. Yeah. Now I have stock specialized stump jumper handles, so I don't know what
That's right.
grips are like. So
Yeah.
I'm going to check that out.
I'm surprised you have grips.
Yeah. Now that's pretty funny. So the next one is actually tires. So what makes this one interesting is, again, I did a lot of research on all this stuff, and I found this. It was a Leadville Race Series webpage that said the best package of tires would be an S-Works Fast Track on the front and a Renegade on the back. So now I'm 3 days before the race. The guy from the bike shop calls, which the bike shop was awesome. Cycles for Life, is that what it was called? God, they were
phenomenal.
The best service I've ever had that I would ever expect to get in a race. And you'll learn more about on number 10. But they were just called me and they're like, I don't think you should use this tire. and I'm like, yeah, but it's on this, this page. My bike weighs 30 pounds. I need to save every ounce of pounds I can. And he just kept saying, he's like, look, man, you're going to flat. And evidently everyone, I checked and checked, and everyone agreed. They're like, yeah, you can't have those sidewalls on this course. Luckily so then I just put a fast track on it, because I'm used to fast tracks here. I kind of knew what to expect from it and kind of worked. So I would just say, double check, lean in, learn a little bit more about the tires selections that are out there, and don't be too much of a weight weenie, because it's probably better that you just stay moving forward and not flat.
An extra 70 grams adds what kind of time to Leadville versus a flat, right? Flat's going to add you, depending upon how quickly and how mechanically inclined you are. It could be 5 minutes or it could be 20 minutes, right?
Yeah. Now they did also convince me to put my pressure way lower. And so I don't know if that was the right thing or not. But I'm used to running 25 on the back and then 23 in the front.
Yeah, which
is
high.
And I think they had it pulled down to maybe like 22 and 20, 20, 22 front back.
And we were thinking there's a lot of road time and there's a lot of hard pack and like gravel time.
Yeah.
And there isn't a ton of technical area in Leadville, right? So that's why we were kind of afraid to drop pressure a ton, right? We're thinking we'd lose some speed. So something to come back to in the future, right? All right, moving on. So number 7, race nutrition prep time. We completely botched this. I
don't know how, but we did.
Well, we had it planned. So it wasn't, so when you're prepping nutrition, you have body needs, right? Any energy expenditure per hour.
Right. 90 grams carbs per hour. Right.
How many carbohydrates are you replacing per hour? What can you digest? And it's not a tip on this top 10 because we did a good job of it. We were practicing a race plan for months prior. We were hitting our carb mark. We were using it on our long rides, our intense rides. We knew what gels we liked. We knew what liquid nutrition worked for us. GI was great. No issues. We had that down. But then you add in only specific stops, right, throughout a race that's 9 to 10 and a half hours long. When you have access to swapping out a Camelback or hydration pack, how many gels are you holding? It becomes a game of timing. And you also don't want to carry extra fluids if you don't need them because now you're holding extra weight, right? And now you have to teach 2 people in your crew what to give us when, expecting that we're going to be half delirious, especially in the back half of that race. So we started this the night before the race, laying everything out, and we already knew the math per hour, but then laying it out on the course plan is what took so long.
Yeah.
So we're figuring out our aid stations. We have Ziploc bags. We have gels marked. This is when I get my caffeinated gel. This is when I have my non-caffeinated. This is when you need to fill my hydration pack that I used in the first half of the race because you'll get it again at the second aid station. This is when you swap a Camelback. I mean, it gets very complex if you let it. And then you're trying to teach two people that have no idea what you've been practicing all summer, how to deliver that at the right time.
Yeah.
And then we also had our oh shit bags, remember?
Right.
So when things go south, we had extra bags that had different kinds of gels or additional nutrition and food. But either way, we started at, 8, 9 o'clock. We were up until, it was after midnight.
Yeah.
We didn't go to bed till after midnight.
Yeah, that should be tip number, 7A,
Yeah.
is getting enough sleep.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
and all this. But to your point, it was what we didn't quite map out appropriately was truly the amount of time expected to get from point A to when we're going to have a teammate or a crew member. And then once we really did that, we're like, ooh, so we only need an hour for that, an hour and a half for that. But then that one, we need 2 hours. Okay, we're going to refill up top. But then we get down there. So it was like taking the time between crew stops and like getting strategic before you ever even get on your plane to go out there.
Correct.
Like we should have
That should be
had
done in
that
state.
part nailed down. Back home, we should have actually labeled all of our Ziploc bags. We should have had the entire plan. Like we had those flow tubes. I would have had all the flow tubes already probably filled up properly.
Yep. Water bottles labeled, aid station number.
Yeah,
we could
I would
done a
not
ton
have
of
done
time.
that beyond leaving my house. I would have done all of that prior to going to Leadville.
100% agree. Yep. And that crushed our sleep. Now you're living high on life in the morning, adrenaline's through the roof, but your sleep's kind of crap anyway out there at elevation. And we definitely didn't help when we got half as much as we should have.
Yeah.
It was bad.
We got 3 or 4 hours sleep the night before
Disaster.
because of this, because we couldn't, our food never cooked. And then we went to
All I
Whole
wanted
Foods.
was a sweet potato.
Yeah. Like, it was crazy, right? So the food took forever. And then the packing of all the nutrition took
Yeah.
forever. And next thing you know, it's like midnight and
Yeah.
you've got to get up at like 3:30 or
Yeah.
whatever it was. Oh, so that was awful. So the next one I'm going to add, number 8, is a double race goal. Now, Ryan and I normally do this really well in regular races that we do locally, but I think I needed that. So Ryan and I are together at Columbine. We're a little off of 9 hours, but not much off at that point. It was still in striking distance.
Yeah.
And as I'm going up Columbine, and what we didn't finish on earlier is I actually gave you my bottle. Is that what I did?
Yeah.
So luckily we were together, so Ryan still made it to the top of Columbine and had fluids. But it was at that moment that I was like, hey man, just take this water bottle. Like I can't hang. So my body's not working. I'm not going to be able to keep up with you. I don't want to slow you down. And then instantly, of course, all the like depressive, like, man, this sucks. I'm not going to hit 9 hours. I'm just going to have that shitty small buckle. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But like, so then it just became like a joyride of sorts, but like a depressive joyride where this sucks, you know? And I wish I just had this secondary recalibration of like, okay, if not 9,
Yeah.
then what? And then what are those timelines to hit? So that way it would keep you in the game. And once you realize that you have to pull the ripcord, it's like, okay, I'm still in a race instead of a joyride.
Yep.
I think that would have been much better for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think when a race is as long as Leadville is, at least from two people that haven't done anything that long, I mean, you were an Ironman, right? But it's a little different animal. There's so many variables, so many things that can go wrong. Altitude, mechanicals, the terrain, the weather. Are you with a pace line? You know, if you're with a pace line, it might be a half-hour difference, right? If you're for multiple hours. So there's so many things that you need to have those ABC goals and strategies throughout. I 100% agree with you. And I think we got a little caught up in everybody wants the big belt buckle. You know, we trained our butts off and we knew it was in striking distance based on our fitness. I think we just put way too much on that, right? Now, I still enjoyed the experience. I thought it was awesome. I mean, it hurts like nothing I've done before. And there was still such a sense of satisfaction finishing it and crossing the finish line, even though we didn't hit our ultimate goal. But I totally agree with what you're saying. You can get off the plan
But there
pretty
were
quick.
some parts where I was talking about the landscape. I was like, oh, do you guys remember that part where you looked out in the mountains? And you're like, no. So I will say there was a part of my joyride that was actually kind of nice. I actually got to see everything where when you're racing, you're grinding, right?
Yeah.
It's looking forward, looking at your computer, probably trying to pace slide a little bit, like grab fluids.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that takes us to number 9. So similar to a goal strategy plan B, a nutrition plan B as well. So that was the longest I've ever been on a bike. And you hear about taste fatigue, and you hear about sour stomach, and you hear about GI going bad and all these things. But everything had worked so well with both of us the whole training season that I didn't think we were going to have an issue. And I don't know if it was mile 80 or 90. It was closer to the end. And the wheels are coming off the bus. You're fatigued. Your legs are shutting down. You just can't produce power anymore. And, you think you're closer than you are. And the race drags on a lot more than you think it does.
Especially the last where you jump back in single track. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, the single track rocks and the gravel at the end.
Yeah.
After you came off that last
soul
climb.
crushing for me.
Brutal. Yes, you're constantly thinking, I'm going to be done in 2-3 miles. And then it just goes on and on and on. But nutrition was a big factor in that. When John talks about his sightseeing journey in his last 20 miles, I didn't have any of that. It was just the road in front of you and your power numbers that are slowly declining. And then it was just the vision that gets smaller and smaller as you're starting to lose it. Well, part of that reason was because I got some serious taste fatigue and nausea at the same time. Now, I wasn't incapable of riding a bike, but I was incapable of drinking more flow. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't get it down. And we packed in a lot of our carbohydrate intake and electrolytes into our fluids. Mm-hmm. And then we supplemented with gels. We took More10, which were great all year long. But when you get to that point where you just can't get any more down, the clock's already been ticking for 8 hours, and it just speeds up. And you're going to bonk pretty soon after. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out how the heck can I get some calories down that I didn't really prepare. I don't have with me. I passed the last aid station. I got to make it home, but I know I need this water and I just can't get it down. You ran into the same feeling, right?
Yeah. So I finished with way too much fluid, and it was because it was all flow, and it just none of it even sounded good to where I didn't even want to taste it.
Yeah.
So what I probably would have done is maybe a lot more either just regular water or maybe Element, and then try to find some other way to get calories. Like we made fun of it. I made fun of my brother. My brother's probably watching this and laughing right now, but he would get these oatmeal cream pies, which I love oatmeal cream pies. When I was little, I could like knock out 5 in a row and still eat a big pasta dinner. And, but it was just like calories. Like, is it food you can get in your soul that you like and it doesn't disrupt your stomach? But I would have probably had Element more. I would have had gel calories still, because I can deal with that if I have to. Yeah. I had those 300, I think they're 300 calorie More10, like oat bars. But it's so dry up there, and that was so sticky. I think I got a quarter of one down.
Yeah.
Like I can't do this.
Yeah.
But sea level, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like I love those things.
Yeah,
It's like a dessert for me.
Yeah.
But up there, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. With me, it's the sweet. That's why the Element, I think, is a great call. Drinking Element with water, and we did that this year at Whiteface. We learned from this, and we switched our strategy in our last race, and it worked. We were able to keep drinking water, got our electrolytes down, and then just hammered some gels, and we were fine.
Yeah.
So, that's a big one moving forward. Big tip is just have a plan B strategy and have it on you when things do go south.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Tip number 10 is bike shipping. Now, my brother actually made a vacation out of Leadville, and he took his family from Atlanta, Georgia, and they drove all the way up to Colorado, and then they flew home. They start school early in Atlanta, I think in August, and then my brother stayed out there for the rest of the time. So, of course, he had his whole bike with him the entire time. So you and I wound up shipping our bikes. We used different locations. Now, mine, I guess the way they took my pedals off, I guess you have to take the pedals off when you ship your bike, but they didn't put it in a box or anything. And somehow one of my pedals were missing in shipping. They just didn't make it. So Cycles
and this was
for
a
Life.
Garmin pedal.
Well, no, luckily it wasn't the Garmin. Oh, no. It was the Garmin pedal, but it wasn't, not the power side.
Yeah.
So I totally lucked out.
Yeah.
That now still on my bike today, I have an old pedal,
Yeah.
and then I think the Garmin one's on the right, maybe the power, whatever it is. Yeah. And so it's just like have a good partner. And we went to the Leadville race page, and I think they were always the sponsor. I mean, they were so awesome. It made it so easy. When it was bike pickup time, you walked in, your bike came out. It's like your brakes worked. They looked at everything. They called me to tell me your tire's not the right tire. You need to change that. Like they were looking after me.
They were.
And they were like, I want you to have a really good, enjoyable race. And they were nice about it. They were like, yeah, man, you can do whatever you want to do. But like, I'm just telling
But
you,
you're gonna
like,
get a flat.
yeah. And then I ran into people there who had been in Leadville for a week or so. And they were like, oh yeah, I went down one of the whatever's hills. And he's like, yeah, my S-Works popped. So I was like, oh my God, thank God they stopped. And they put a pedal on for me, actually, to use for race day.
That's awesome.
And then I brought my other one just in case, I think. But I mean, they were awesome. They gave me my tire back at the end when I shipped it. I mean, it was just, they were fantastic. So, but it's just understanding that process, how it works, get your bike out early. You know, I think my bike went out 2 weeks before the race. Is that sound about right?
Yeah. I think, August 1, 2, something like that.
Gotcha. Now, my brother did drive it back for me, and in hindsight, it only saved me like $150 or so, I think, because there's a certain amount that now, you know, I would have done that a little differently. Had I known my brother was going out and coming back, I would have said, hey, what's the cost to just do it one way?
Yeah.
But you know, some other people said that they actually looked at shipping it to a bike shop in Colorado. So where they flew into Denver, and then they would just have that bike shop and they would trailer it up. But when we looked at rental cars and things that could fit bikes, it wasn't easy.
No, not at all. I agree. And just a little side note on that bike shop too, Cycles for Life. I don't know if you remember, but when we went for a ride a couple weeks prior to having to ship our bikes, I think he was trying to take me out because he knew I'd beat him. So he kicks my bike, knocks me over. I bend my derailleur. Yeah, this is like mid-July. And took it to a bike shop or two here, and I got a cassette replaced. I got a chain replaced. They tried to fix my derailleur, and it was too bent. It wasn't working well. So I'm going to Leadville. Just shipped my bike to Leadville. I'm going to do these climbs that are, you know, unfathomable, and I can't stay in a gear. So I'm like freaking out the whole time the bike's shipping out there. The guys inspected it at Cycles for Life, and they said, sorry, buddy, this thing's bent, but we can swap it for you right now. So I got a new derailleur for race day.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I tested it out on Leadville. But I mean, that was great. Most bike shops, well, I shouldn't say that. You could think that if a bike shop is going through, how many bikes are getting delivered?
Had to be
1,000.
Yeah, it was crazy. They took care of a lot of bikes and still gave everyone such good personal service. Yeah,
Agreed.
I didn't know that about yours.
Yeah, kudos to them. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that stress.
He wasn't following road signals.
Right.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our top 10 tips. This is going to be a little bit of a series. I think we're going to continue down everything that we learned about Leadville. And I do think it's important to find content that'll make you better at Leadville, specifically for people like us that should be middle of the pack, scratching at that 9-hour limit. We're going to talk a little bit about what we did with training, equipment, nutrition strategies, you know, and maybe more of when we're going to go back.
Yeah.
That could be my brother's going back next year, I think, or he's going to try.
Is he really?
Yeah, I think he's going to do the Austin Rattler, and I forget what else in the racing series to try to get in again.
Yeah. I definitely have the itch at some point.
I need a new bike. I need mortgage rates to drop a little bit so I can buy a new bike.
Yeah.
And
we'll put the link to your company in the notes of this video.
Yeah. No, it was something I will say it's funny when things get really hard, how easy it is to start blaming stuff.
Yes.
Oh, the altitude. It's got to be the altitude. It's not me being a sissy. It's the altitude. It's like, I've got a 30-pound bike and everyone else has this like fancy 24-pound bikes.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's these excuses that kind of pop up. But you and I are also intrigued by all those things. Like how much does that, like we're going to do something, and this is maybe why you should follow this series, is like I want to go back to that Frederick Hill and I want to do a series of climbs with different weight vests. Like I really want to know what is the difference in time for weight at using certain watts per kilogram. Like we couldn't find any metric of that. Like what should you expect to finish this climb in based on X?
Yep.
I couldn't find it. Maybe someone can comment below if they found some cool ones, but that was
I agree.
like, didn't know what it was.
Yeah, weight is a thing. And it's not being a weight weenie. When you have 10 pounds to lose on your body, or you can shave a couple pounds off your bike, it is a big deal when you're climbing something for an hour. And it's an average of 8-degree grade. It's a big deal. So you were definitely riding the stallion up that mountain.
Yeah.
And
But
I'm
even
sure it
things
did you
down
a
to like
disservice.
hubs, like how important are the hubs?
Yeah.
I would think on and
Well, let's save that
lessons
for
on how
another-
to climb, right? Like
Yeah.
there's so many other things that we've
Yeah.
learned since we
Yeah.
went to Leadville that now it's in my head of like,
You wanna go back
oh man,
and
I
try
really
them.
want to go back. I
Yeah.
want to borrow my brother's bike
Yep. Yeah.
and get there 2 weeks early and then use the things that we've learned just about how to manage climbing and descending better with some
Agreed.
lessons we've taken. So
I agree. To be determined. We'll see. We still have to get back in, right?
exactly.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. I hope you've enjoyed it. Comment any questions you have below. If you want us to dive a little deeper on any of these topics, we are happy to do so.